Don't know how lucky you are, boy. Back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR.
Welcome to Nostalgia Komrade. Today we are looking through Goldeneye. The James Bond series has always been rich on Kranberries, but they moved to another league by setting almost the entire movie in Russia. We start with a base in USSR with a USSR toilet and seemingly USSR newspaper. The headline says, 15 years ago, the party allowed a soccer player to play for a foreign team. The lower headline says, Zonin in Burma, live like a Tsar and work like a bull. And the lowest bold headline says, Matthews won't lie. In fact, I googled this newspaper and the article seems real. Which is weird, as we all know Hollywood has that special prop newspaper to shoot in every movie without having to deal with copyright issues. Yes, Hollywood doesn't like to deal with copyright infringement. Oh, the irony. The sign says, present pass to enter. And even though spelled correctly, the door is card locked. You can't enter it without a card key anyway. There is no guard you have to present the pass to. I think what they meant was authorized personnel only, which doesn't seem to have a direct alternative in Russian. I won't comment on the uniform of the soldiers, and especially the general. This would be really nerd-only nitpicking. Especially this uniform. The sign says gas under high pressure, spelled correctly. The barrels say toxic, spelled correctly also. The sign says danger, do not enter, a stupid sign but spelled correctly.
I'm going for a cigarette.
The sign says power plant. I understand this is disguise, but in Russia, power plant entries bear the sign danger, high voltage, as in the rest of the world. This is the first real Kranberry. It's a very specific type of smoke, Belamor. The tobacco is placed only in the tip, for about an inch. The other part of the tube is hollow, so you can shape it in various forms. In fact, you have to shape it to prevent tobacco from getting into your mouth. This is a very cheap and rather strong tobacco, a very strange choice for a young smoker like this computer nerd. Young people mostly use Belamor to blow away the tobacco and stuff it with pot, since rolling paper is more expensive and messy than a pack of Belamor.
2 operational satellites, sir. Petya and the Misha, both in
Another Kranberry. I don't know if it's okay to give pillow names to gadgets in the USA, but in Russia, most military air staff has flower or trees-inspired names, like Topol M. Topol is a cottonwood tree. We had USSR in the opening credits, while the insignia is Russia now. Why the text is in English? Like newspapers and wall signs, computer software in Russia has Russian interface. However, looks like everyone in Russia understands English, as Bond has no trouble showing off his wannabe British received pronunciation to all the characters. Why St. Petersburg? It's not the capital of Russia for like a century. All the military officials are in Moscow. Another Kranberry. Common pastime in Russia is marching. Not. Parades are very rare events, usually once a year on the World War II anniversary. And military orchestras normally don't play well in transit. My favorite part.
Deliver your report.
Deliver your report, Mr. Nishkov. I don't know where the stereotypical pronunciation comes from in most movies, but to me, it sounds more like German than Russian. Russian language is vowel-based. They don't stretch consonants or emphasize R. So the authentic sound will be like, deliver your report, Mr. Nishkov.
Deliver your report. It would seem presumptuous, General, to blame this incident on Siberian separatists.
Oh my god. Siberian separatists? The population of Siberia is like 20% of total Russian population. Most of them are the same nationalities as the rest of Russians. Why would they want to separate? Siberian separatists is like Texas separatists. This is my favorite part. Desmond Llewellyn, the famous Q, the gadget guy. Unfortunately, he died in 1999. This is one of his best performances.
Do please try and return some of this equipment in pristine order. Don't touch that. It's my life.
In a church? Russian guys often abuse foreign guests by showing too much churches. Even some booklets contain Russian translations of "Please, no more churches." But in real life, we don't go to church that much. Vodka again. That's a cranberry. He drinks it as it was whiskey or cognac. In Russia, vodka is served with food. You must eat something after a shot of vodka, preferably some salted fish or at least a pickle. Otherwise, you'll get drunk really, really fast. Of course, for some this is the main goal. But he doesn't look like one. No one sips vodka like whiskey or cognac, since it's tasteless.
No more foreplay. Take me to Uranus.
What did he say? Take me to Uranus? No wonder she replied, "Блядь," with terrible pronunciation. By the way, this is a very strong curse. I would have to myself if it wasn't for the art. This is actually interesting. Monument scrapyard. In fact, it's not a cranberry. So many Soviet statues were dismantled, so there has to be a monument's graveyard. The sign says missile loading here. Don't know what they wanted to say, but it's spelled correctly. She calls him a swine flawlessly. I don't know why they spent Misha like Chicago. Common transliteration would be M-I-S-H-A. I wouldn't comment on much of the St. Petersburg scenes, as they were shot on location, and the signs are correct for that reason. On the whole, this movie was fun and really rebooted the franchise. However, my personal favorite James Bond is Roger Moore. This completes this review. See you next time.